Hi, I'm Lindsey Coffey.
And I'm Michala Rubinstein, and today we're interviewing Dansk Vegetarisk Forening, also known as the Vegetarian Society of Denmark.
An impactful organization advocating for sustainability within the agricultural sector.
Introducing Martin Keller, UN Sustainable Goals Director of Dansk Vegetarisk Forening.
So Martin, what is your goal as a company?
To eat more plant-based food for the future.
Yeah,
It's very important.
It's a good goal. And plant-based, it's very delicious. You do know a lot about plant-based diets and the environment. What are the negative impacts of the agricultural industry to the environment?
We use too much space for the cows and the pigs, they're eating a lot of food. We have to eat more plant-based food because our nature is disappearing. You have this string here. This is all our singing birds in Denmark 50 years ago. Our singing birds are disappearing, so we just have this small amount of our singing birds left. So all these species are now disappearing in Denmark because we don't have any insects left, and we don't have square meters for nature. The cows and the pigs have eaten all the food.
You're saying it affects our biodiversity. How can a vegetarian lifestyle change our biodiversity?
To grow crops for organic food, without pesticides, without poisons in the fields. Poisons and the pesticides are killing all insects, and then the birds and the frogs and all the other animals disappearing because there's no food left. 70 or 75% of all insects are gone in Denmark.
So you wouldn't naturally make that connection that our insects and our biodiversity loss in that realm is affected due to our agricultural industry.
Yeah.
Eventually we will run out of food. Does eating a plant-based solve the risk of food shortages?
80% of all the crops are going to the cows and the pigs, and only 10% for our stomach, And right now Denmark, we are producing food for around 15 million people. If we all ate plant-based food and had the same amount of fields in Denmark, and then we will be able to produce food for 80 million people if we all eat plant-based food just produced in Denmark.
What specifically do you think needs to change in the world, and how do we facilitate that change?
We need to teach everyone to live more sustainable. It's very important for people to be more aware of the environment.
How do we really push them to want to make that change?
Probably a crisis will be able to push people. The World Bank said that we in the Western world, with lots of money, lots of food, we will only react when we can feel the crisis, when we can feel the pain, then we will react, because we need to react.
This is Katrine Ejlerskov, Center Manager for Danish Center of Plant-Based and Organic Future. As a researcher for plant-based diets, how do we make plant proteins a substitute for meat and still get our required nutrients like B12?
Well, I think people need to realize that there are no intensive animal farming without supplementation of those animals. In a way, you can say that omnivores are also supplemented. It's just going through the animals instead of directly through a pill. It's a fact that many nutritionists are not aware of. We're not taught into where those animals get their B12. They actually have to be supplemented.
Instead of the animal get supplements, like we can go around the animal and get it directly from the source.
That's it. Yeah. In some other countries, plant-based foods are more often fortified with, for example, B12. So then it's easier to get it through the diet.
What would you say to the critical person stating that humans have been eating meat for centuries and that is our natural diet?
It is kind of an illusion now to think that it is a natural diet because our food system is so industrialized. When you think about how we ate in the old days, it's kind of looking at one point in a time, but we have been eating a lot of various diets.
We were also farmers and gatherers.
We ate roots, we ate fruits, and we had greens as a part of our diet. I mean, the fibers and the vitamins that you get from the greens, they also have it at that time. When you hear about people saying they ate so much meat in the old days, which old days was it that they're talking about? 50 years ago, people had just tiny amounts of meat, and then lots of potatoes, other vegetables. It seems people are kind of picking what they think.
What they want. So it's almost like this illusion of what we used to eat that's not necessarily true.
If you want to adapt it to a Western diet, you would have all this junk food and these very refined carbs.
McDonald's was not.
It wasn't.
That was not back in the day. How do you nudge people in a greener direction without limiting them or banning certain items like meat, for example?
So nudging is giving a gentle push forward. So you don't take away options, you add options, and you change the way, the order, for example, in how you see it. If you have the water in the eye height, more people will actually choose the water instead of the Coke if the Coke was an eye height. Also, when you look at the menu, often the vegetarian or vegan options will be kind of in a box by itself, showing that it's part of the special diet. Researchers have shown that if you'd include it in the ordinary menu, name it something that sounds delicious like the other dishes, you can increase the sales by 50%.
Here we have Rune-Christoffer Dragsdahl, Secretary General.
Rune-Christoffer, what are the environmental and health benefits of eating plant-based versus eating meat?
First and foremost, a lot of land where we currently grow fodder, feed for all the animals. So we can free up huge areas of land that could be used for nature, for more rainforests, for meadows, for everything else than just intensive agricultural production. And there's actually even a link between that and climate change. If we free up a lot of land and we grow a lot of trees there, those trees could also soak up huge amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere. And scientists have actually calculated if we did that, we could buy some very important extra years for the transition and to avoid a climate catastrophe.
So it's not just for our own benefits, but also for the environment.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I love that you said that because that's so true.
So for health, there are lots of benefits as well. If you eat plant-based, it will reduce the risk of coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and also certain types of cancer.
I read that according to PETA, we're anatomically herbivores. Do you agree with that statement?
As far as I know, the truth is that we are omnivorous, so we can eat both plants and animals. The question is whether it's good for our bodies, and today at least we have a choice.
You say it's actually directly unhealthy for us to eat meat.
It is unhealthy, but the thing is you can eat small amounts of it where it doesn't create any disease. This is just the quantity that is the issue. If you start eating what most people believe is just a moderate amount of meat, that is actually a lot of meat, and that is damaging to the body. It's interesting to remember that maybe 3 million years ago, our ancestor apes were eating only plants, and they started eating red meat. And at that time, that was important in the evolution of humans. But then, approximately 200,000 years ago, we also started eating tubers, roots, and that was also very important at that time. 10,000 years ago, then we start, settling, going away from being hunter-gatherers and settling the land, growing crops, and also keeping livestock. What time in history you put your time machine, you'll get a different answer to the question of what is the real diet. Stop asking that question about what is the real, original, true, evolutionary diet, and look at what can we eat today and what would be best for the planet, ourselves, and the animals.
We all know the stereotype, real men eat meat, right? So how do we garner appeal to go plant-based to make it a little more sexy?
Some might have seen the documentary The Game Changers. Actually have a small experiment with some young guys who have a plant-based meal one evening and a meal with meat. And they measure the length and size of their erections in the nighttime.
Really?
And,
wow, okay.
And that's just a small experiment. But what they see a major difference there actually. And it's simply because the saturated fat blocks the artery, the smallest artery in the body, down there. So that also means that if you use saturated fat, there's a better flow of blood in your body. Probably the best-selling argument if you really want more men to do plant-based,
wow.
Or if you want women to force more men to do it, you might want to use those arguments.
Guys, you heard it straight from the camel's mouth.
Yeah.
Here's just another reason to go plant-based. You can't argue.
The doctor who was doing that, he was the expert urologist from the American Medical Association. So he was basically America's leading penis expert. That was the guy who made it. We're still waiting for a proper scientific experiment.
But it looks like that's...
Yeah, I can only say I've never eaten meat my whole life, and I think I'm doing fine.
You're doing fine?
Yeah.
Here we go. So that's actually honestly a great reason. Yes, let's give a little applause for that. I love that. All of you fitness guys out there, here's your reason to go plant-based. It's actually more masculine to do that, apparently. So let's move on. Do you think that the state carries a responsibility for people to incorporate a greener diet and to be more sustainable?
Every country is different. Generally, what the state can do, for example, is the food canteens, cafeterias, hospitals. There should always be at least a plant-based option. The state can, of course, have dietary guidelines which would be really green. Ideally, we should have a tax system. A lot of things are not priced according to the cost they're actually having in the world. You know, there are lots of products and foods that carry with them a very heavy environmental burden. So if you want to buy that product, you should pay the price for the environmental damage. Sure. Tax systems should be created in a way that gives us incentives, that the things that are good for the world should be cheaper. Every one of us can't make ethical choices hundreds of times every day. We also need a society that makes it easy and attractive to make the right choices.